The lesson.
Oh, yeah.
Brett, Maher, Andrew McLeod, thank you very much for jumping on.
Yeah, good to be here.
I guess, yeah, you know, as we were talking before, you know, you guys first came on my radar when, you know, around the time when I first came to Australia, got familiar with football and basketball. And I was originally a fan of, and still am, you know, the Magic, Melbourne team, and West Coast. However, through watching those teams play a lot, I became very familiar with you guys.
Are you saying that so, like, you know, just to rub salt in our wounds because they used to beat us a lot, or?
Well, nah, that's just the way it naturally happened. And look, I know that there's times where, you know, we were discussing, you know, you played the Magic in finals. Was it 90?
98, we played them in the grand final and beat them.
Yeah, you see, so that's rubbing salt.
Which
in
is
my
nice.
wound.
Beat them over there is always good.
Was that because it was best of 3 back then,
Best of
wasn't it?
3, yeah. We surprisingly swept them. We weren't expected to. I think they were like 24-2 on the season.
Yeah.
And as hot a favourites as you could get, but yeah, we just put it together at the right time.
Did you go right?
Oh, I did all right.
And see, again, on the flip, I remember West Coast and the Crows having some pretty good battles. And I'm pretty confident that West Coast would have come out on the bottom of some of those.
I don't like the way you said that, though.
Huh?
Yeah, it was a bit, you know. Nah, they were very good. They had our measure in the middle of 2000s, so 05, 06. As good as a team we were, we just could not beat West Coast. They were that good, and you know they had a plethora of stars in that team.
Yeah.
Unbelievable side.
Because that was that era was the Judd Cousins era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a bad midfield. Kerr.
Yeah, that's right. Now, debatably, best midfield of all time?
Yeah, definitely in that conversation. I think if you
Brisbane's midfield when they three-peated would have been up there as well.
We've talked about this a bit, haven't we?
Black
Yeah.
And those
The
guys.
Fab Five, they had the Fab Five, but yeah, I think West Coast, you know, like those 3 guys, you know, and some of their other Brawn.
Who was your midfield in back-to-back?
Well, back to back. Yeah, we had Rashudo, Goodwin, Bickley, Darren Jarman was in there.
Decent names in there
Sean
as well.
Wren,
Yeah.
Sean Wren, but yeah,
Not
I don't
too
think
shabby.
when you have those guys, they're like, some of those guys are 5, 6-time All Australians and, you know, Brownlow medalists. We were just a couple of half-backs that basically became midfielders, whereas they were just like genuine stars.
And then, so I guess you guys released a podcast. I think it was May of this year, around that.
Yeah.
And you know, as soon as it was on my radar, I was like, oh wow, you know, you got Brett Maher, you got Andrew McLeod, both from Adelaide. You know, both got rings. I'm pretty sure you've got finals MVPs.
Couple of finals MVPs and
you
a couple over here as well.
Call him Larry.
And you got back-to-back Norm Smith as well. So I'm just like, I get it. Like, I see it. Now, prior to your professional careers, did you guys have a relationship, or did you meet through professional sports, or after you guys retired, or how did that come about?
Oh, we kind of crossed paths. We did a lot of cross promotions with the 36ers and Crows back in those days. So we crossed paths at some of those, and just Adelaide's pretty small anyway. So we'd kind of met a few times, and then, that friendship kind of just grew from there. At one point, we had the same agent and that as well. So we would go and do certain things together through that agent as well, which worked out pretty good.
Ironically, our 2 eldest kids are born on the same day as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go.
So we must have done something together that night.
And then
I thought Connor looked a lot like me.
And then, so if you guys have known each other for quite a few years, is what brought podcast about? Like, why did you guys decide to start doing that?
Well, it's probably funny. We've been talking about stuff like this for a little while, and
We're bored.
yeah, a couple of years ago, a couple of years ago now, we were on a trip as a group, family trip. It was Brett's wife's birthday in Bali, and we were over there and we were having this conversation around a podcast with a friend of ours. We might have had a couple of bintangs by then, I reckon. But it sort of started from there, and then they just kept growing. And every time we tend to get together as a group, well, there's a couple of things that goes on. We play a lot of dominoes and a lot of cards, but then there's always a part where the conversation starts to talk about sport, and
We're both pretty competitive.
Yeah.
If you hadn't guessed.
so there's like
Everything we do, there's like
So
trying to better the other one. And
talking about your best players, or like putting that together, and then like, okay, you want to have a go. I reckon I can beat you in a shooting contest. That doesn't mean
I can't beat him in a kicking contest, but I'll still have a crack at it.
Table tennis, we have a crack at table tennis, so there's a bit of competition there, and so that sort of probably started it all. And then during the start of the year, when had a bit more time, we just was like, hey, I've got this idea, what do you reckon? And then that was it.
Yeah. Just worked out really good timing-wise with what we're both doing, and obviously with COVID, a lot of things shut down, and there's probably been a fair ramp-up of podcasts everywhere coming on board, but
We're just one of those nuffies.
we thought there was a market for something like us two jumping together and talking about the sports we love, so it's been really good fun.
And then, so tell us a bit, about the podcast in itself, the title of it, how many episodes you guys have done, what sort of topics you guys have covered in those episodes, that sort of thing.
We're up to our 22nd podcast this week, so 22 weeks worth, and it's mainly we run through kind of a breakdown of the football. Obviously, Andrew has a bit more knowledge in that topic, and I just chip in with some random comments, but that's pretty good fun. And then normally a bit of basketball stuff. At the moment, obviously, there's no NBL going on, but there's the NBA, and we had the Jordan documentary, which was
Gave us good content.
Which was really good, and Andrew loves his basketball and that as well. And I think, as we were talking about, you don't even have to be a basketball lover to enjoy that show. Yeah. So we've kind of then cover off on basketball, and then we have a couple of what we try and make entertaining segments, where we have a 20-question segment where our producer comes up with a well-known Australian sports person, and we have 20 questions to try and guess who it is, which...
Test the knowledge.
Yeah, I'm coming last in that at the moment, so that's not quite as good fun. And then we have a nuffy segment. So I know back when early days when I was playing, we used to call some people nuffies that couldn't quite grasp concepts. So we have a segment where we pull out 5 nuffies that have kind of come into the media through the course of the week. And
see if they're actually, if
they qualify.
Yeah, they qualify to be a nuffy for the week. It's a bit of fun trying to work through that and to.
There's a lot of them at the moment, especially. And then what do we do after that? We kind of jump into.
Yeah, we just it's
a joke. That's a good segment.
The other thing we try to do is really to put our personal slant on it too. So. Yeah. Relating some stories from the past of how we did things or what things that happened that people, they like to hear some of those stories about, when you were playing and what are those experiences, what did you feel, or some funny stories. So it's always good to be able to do that because people they remember those moments and times and they can relate to it. So
absolutely.
I think that's a big one. And the fact that, I think we're just a couple of larrigans, what we try to be.
I think the other part we've really enjoyed is we do some stuff on Facebook and social media. We do some little challenges. So we've put a few of them on, and they've been quite entertaining. Probably, there's one where we do the flower challenge. Couple of
paper, rock, scissors.
Paper, rock, scissors. That was quite good fun. So we try and have a bit of fun with it and have a laugh.
And what platforms do people go to find the podcast?
Oh, every platform that basically, that you can get your, you can stream from. So whether that be Spotify, Apple Music, but
YouTube, iHeartRadio, all of those. It's on all of them.
We use Buzzsprout is, where we, I guess, there's our little website there that we have. So we usually put our links up on our Facebook pages and Instagram that people can get through that way.
And then it's the Bunji and Brettster podcast?
Yeah.
It is.
You got to put the good-looking bloke at the front, so Bunji and Brettster.
You guys are competitive, man. Wicked. And yeah, look, I mean, mentioning how, people like it when you tell your personal experiences on the field and people remember it and stuff. I want to cover some of those things because I guess as a fan, I have a lot of those as well. And what I want to do is, I guess, try to cover your careers simultaneously. So to begin with, when were you guys drafted? So into the NBL, and then for yourself into the AFL.
Oh, for me, I came straight out of the Australian Institute of Sport when I was 18, and came back, signed up with Adelaide. So that was in 1992, which was the first year of what was then the Clipsal Powerhouse, and now Titanium Arena, which the team's just moved from there, obviously, into the entertainment centre. So 92 was my first year, and for me, it was always a goal to play for the 36ers. I'd grown up watching them and enjoyed going to the games, so it was kind of a dream come true.
Yeah, so you were born and bred in South Australia.
Yeah.
And at some point, with the transition of the stadiums, wasn't one of the stadiums named after yourself?
The court. It was the only way they could get rid of me, really. They came to me right at the end of my career and said, look, we've got to get rid of you. How can we do it? No, not really. They just, I guess, I was there so long, they were like, sheepers, we should honour him in some way. And at the time, the only other court that I knew of that was kind of named after someone was the Boston Celtics, where they named it after Red Auerbach. And so to have it done here was a huge honour. And they've kind of carried that over, moving from Titanium to the Entertainment Centre. They still call it the Brett Maher Court there, and have my big signature on it somewhere.
Yeah, word. And then so you're born and bred in SA, but you are originally from Darwin. And I think you came down with your family or your father and...
No, my dad just dropped me off, basically.
Yeah.
Just kicked me out of the car. And, pretty much. I came down in 94. So I came down here and I boarded with a family, Port Adelaide family, and playing in the SANFL for the Magpies. And yeah, basically that was it. I came down, my dad dropped me off and he drove off, and I spent about 4 months playing for the Magpies, played in a premiership in the SANFL with them, and then got drafted initially to the Fremantle as a pre-concession pick at the end of 95. Because they could have two players that they could pick up from South Australia. One was me and the other one was Darryl Wakelin. And then they traded Darryl Wakelin to St Kilda and traded me to the Crows.
It was a good decision, wasn't it?
Very good decision. Best decision in my football career.
Now, when you've, because I interviewed an artist called Baker Boy, and one of the things that we discussed is when he's transitioned from, I can't remember exactly which part of Australia he came from.
He's a Yolngu man, I think. Yeah.
There you go.
He's from Adelaide, yeah.
And we discussed how when he was younger, he used to hunt from the land. Now, for yourself, was it the same scenario? You guys used to hunt from the land. So how was that experience, and how was that transition going from living with that sort of cultural background to, I guess, just getting, placed in city, lifestyle, and the changes in that, like adapting?
Very tough.
Yeah.
That's probably, for me, that cultural shift was probably the hardest thing to adapt to. And I've had these conversations a lot, but yeah, like going from that where we're used to, fishing, hunting, and, like your freezer, we have freezer full of food that we catch. And that's just part of it, where you come here and living in the territory, there's a big Asian influence as well. So like we grew up in a very multicultural place, and there's a big Malay flavour there too. So we, lots of times we eat lots of curries and stews with rice and stuff, and it's very different. And that's just what we grew up with, and utilising what we used to hunt. Come down here, and the shift in food was probably the most interesting one for me, because I've never seen a schnitzel, I've never seen a mashed potato. I never grew up on this sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden I got piles of it, and I'm like, man, soups, eating pumpkin soup. I'm like, we don't eat soup in Darwin unless it's cold.
Yeah,
But
wow.
no one eats cold soup. But yeah, it just was one of those things that it was just that was the culture shock of different foods, and it was it took a little while to get used to.
And then when you talk about, the old man dropping you off, and you say it with, a bit of tongue in cheek, but I imagine that would have also contributed to the difficulty in adapting. How did you find that aspect of it as well?
Yeah, it was tough. Obviously, I was 17 at the time, move away from home. Basically, it was like, yeah, here's an opportunity, have a crack at it, make something for yourself. And yeah, that was it. Like, I had to get a job. I was boarding at a place that I had to pay rent. And yeah, then play footy, try and play footy and make something of it. So it was really tough to, and the weather. It was heading into winter, and when you grow up in Darwin,
Don't have a winter.
we don't even.
You have a wet season, but you don't have a winter.
I don't even own a jacket. So, there's all those things that you have to deal with, and it's like, wow, it's cold. And I remember the footy club, they were great, but it was like, we'll get you a job. And they got me a job in the wool sheds down at Port Adelaide. And I'd never seen bloody sheep, let alone wool. And here I was packing bays of wool into this machine, freezing cold shed, and that didn't last too long.
Yeah,
I reckon it lasted about a week. It's that sort of tough it was a little bit of tough love, like, here's an opportunity, and then you got to go from doing that, try and play footy, go training, and footy's played very different in South Australia than it was in the Territory. So having to learn all of that and sort of work your way through it is a bit of a. But I had really great support. Like Port Adelaide were great. The family I lived with were amazing. Became like my second family away from home, and I was able to adapt. There was a couple of little trips back and forth home for homesickness until my mum and dad gave me a kick up the arse and sent me back. So,
yeah, wow. So it sounds like you got a bit of that tough love.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, I had to. It was either that or, I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So they sort of, in the end, they sort of pushed me in that direction.
You get drafted in 92, and you get drafted to the Crows in 95. And then 2 years later in 94, the Sixers make the finals for the first time.
First time since, the last championship was 86, so that we won. And so it was a 8-year gap between then and having this opportunity again.
Yeah, so 94 was the first time that you experienced.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that was against, in the grand final.
That was against North Melbourne. So we kind of went in a little bit as favourites. They had a very good team, but then Mark Davis in the game before the grand final dislocated his shoulder, and so shouldn't have been playing. And he's got a fair bit of muscle up there to hold it together, so he ended up playing, but he was a shadow of his normal self out on the court. And the first game, that was the best of 3. The first game we lost pretty much on the buzzer here. And so obviously if he was fit and healthy, I think we would have won that. And then we went back to their place and they smashed us by 30 odd. So
it's 2-0, they swept it.
Yeah.
Now, in 94, was that when they had Daryl McDonald?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, Daryl McDonald, Paul Rees won MVP of the final series.
That's right.
Pretty much thanks to Daryl McDonald, just dishing straight to him. But yeah, they had Daryl Pearce, who had left Adelaide only a couple of years earlier. And yeah, Pat Reedy, McLeod, a heap of great players there, Paul Maley.
Who was their coach?
Brett Brown.
That's right.
Yeah, so he's gone on to NBA and
Yeah.
released from the 76ers deal recently, but a great coach. And I had some other interaction with him with the Australian team as well. He was the assistant coach for our, I think he was at both the 96 and 2000 Olympics. He was our assistant, I think. So, yeah, I really thought he was a great coach and knew what he's talking about, obviously, and a really good demeanour with the players as well.
And then, so did you have to D up on DMAC?
Yeah.
How'd you find that job?
Not fun. I mean, he's straight out of the streets of New York. Like, we hadn't really seen many players like him.
That's what I remember as a kid.
Yeah, just coming out, and he would, if you weren't watching, he'd just throw him, smack you in the head with the ball if you're on his team. So, really hard to stay in front of. And now that you brought it up, thank you. But he scored that buzzer beater that cost us game 1 was on me.
You said defense. You said defense, right?
No, I stayed in front of him, but he still nailed the shot over me. And I was lucky enough to play with him on a couple of Australian teams. He obviously had his naturalisation and played with us in 2001, and it was really fun playing with him.
He's got good handles, eh?
Oh, unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Some of the best I've seen. He looks kind of loose with it, but he's in full control and really athletic. He was I think one of the great imports that come out.
And like you said, I remember when I first caught on to him at the time, it was like no one in the league was playing with that, that style.
The flair and style and all that. We hadn't seen many players like that come out here.
No.
Since we've had a few more, but it was a real New York style. Like his outside game wasn't his strong point, but
his handles
getting to the bucket, and he was so long. I think he led the league in steals most years because he just played the lanes and always seemed to reach around and steal it off you. Got me plenty of times.
He might have gone on to play in the Magic, I think.
He went on, where did he go? He went, played for the Tigers as well. So, he had some really good years there in Melbourne.
And then only 2 years after you've been drafted, you've played in your first grand final. Crows, it was 97-98, wasn't it, that Crows won back-to-back?
Yep.
So interesting, you guys both had grand final experience pretty quick, because to my understanding, a lot of professional athletes won't even get to participate in a grand final, like in a whole career. You guys you're in, and then 2 years later, you're in a grand final. A couple of years later, you're in a grand final. I guess for both of you, did you anticipate to get to that sort of situation that early on in your career?
I don't know. I don't know. Well, probably my first 2 years, I wouldn't have thought we'd be there that quickly. So, like him to do it.
The club was pretty young in itself, wasn't it?
Yeah, they'd only been around since '91. They played in a prelim in '93, where they were pretty close. They had put together a pretty good list, and then they sort of fell down and started to build. And my first 2 years, we didn't finish in the final, in the top 8. Well, at the time, I think it was top 8 still, but didn't finish and didn't even look like playing finals. And then, so it all came around pretty quick, like the change around, and we didn't have a lot of different personnel. Different coach came in and pushed us in that direction, but it's not one of those things that probably thought was going to happen that quickly.
Yeah, so when you jumped on to the Crows, they weren't already like a championship contender.
No, they sucked.
Yeah. Well,
I think once you get there that early, though, you kind of go, oh, this is going to happen regularly. And then it's not till the end of your career you look back and you kind of cherish the few times you did get there.
Yeah. And then so for yourself, for your first finals experience, so the first one you had a crack at, you actually won, 97.
Did okay.
Not too shabby. You won the Norm Smith, which is, I guess, in comparative to basketball, is like the finals or the grand final.
Grand final MVP, which
according to Larry.
Well, yeah, the Larry Sandstock medal for us and Norm Smith for these guys. So yeah, to win that in your first grand final is pretty impressive. Yeah.
So I guess tell us a little bit first of all about that 97 season. You know, the regular season. Did you guys? At which point did you realise, okay, we've got a real shot at this? And then once you got into the grand final, you know, how was the anticipation and how was the experience in that game?
Yeah, well, it was very different because we lost our first 4 games, like pretty bad. We got beat up, and so we generally sucked at the start of the year. We trained so hard, we got into this, and we thought, oh, here we go, it's all going to happen, and then we didn't start too well, and probably the thing that changed it for us was in that 97 season was the first showdown. So there was all this hype about Port Adelaide coming in the competition, playing against the Crows, here the new kids on the block, and we were supposed to beat them, but we didn't. They beat us in the first showdown, and it was like all doom and gloom, except for one person was the coach walked in and said, they'd written like 16, I think it was, or 18 on the board, and we were like looking at this whiteboard thinking, what the hell is this? And that was it. He said, what does this represent? And I think it was Matthew Liptak at the time, put his hand up and said, that's how many games left in the year. He said, that's it. That's all we've got to worry about. It's the next game and then this number. It's how many games, how many opportunities we've got to get better. So we just basically plugged away, and then on that, I think, you know, he had belief in us, and that belief started to grow. We started to win a few games, and
where'd you finish on the ladder in the regular season?
we ended up finishing 4th in the regular season, and then finals was. Well, it was foreign to most of us. Like we had an average age of about 22, I think it was.
Wow.
So we were just like, and he used to have this thing where he'd go, all right, guys, so when we get to the end of the year, the AFL, they send you this letter, and it says that they want you to come and play finals. So you get to, and then if we win, they'll send us another letter. And so we sort of played on that as we went along, and yeah, it was just one of those things that we just sort of went along, and we played West Coast, beat West Coast in a final, then went on to Geelong, played against Geelong here, and beat them in a final by about 8 points. We were only talking about this the other day, and then then we played the Bulldogs, and
Looked like you're going to lose that one.
yeah, I think we were 23 points down with about 10 minutes to go or 12 minutes to go. I think it was in the half time of the game where we had one of our ruckmen was best player and one of the best players in the competition had come back from knee reconstruction, Sean Wren. He used to wear this massive brace on his leg, and he came in at half time and he basically took his brace off and threw it down and across the room, and I think he did deliberately so everyone could see it. And he was like our like spiritual leader, and when he did that, we were all like, wow. And then we all sort of he was one that he loved getting pumped up. Well, people to get into him, and so we used to have this thing. We were pretty tight, and he'd tell me to get stuck into him, So I was in the middle. Here I was, 21 years old, and I was like, basically, he was rucking against a Brownlow medalist, Scott Wind, and I was telling him that he's going to eat you, and I was pumping him up, and it worked. It started to work, and we just got fired him up, and back on the back of him being really competitive, we were able to get ourselves in the game.
Yeah, wow.
And then that last 10 to 12 minutes, we just built that belief and slowly pegged it away and turned that 23-point deficit into 3-point win.
So someone's kicked a goal, 3 points down to get you guys 3 points up, and then the remainder of the game is just clocked out, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I do vaguely remember that.
And then it was like, we're in a grand final.
And then so you've gone on to the grand final against St Kilda. It started a bit slow, and then you've wound up winning by 20 plus points. And yeah, you win the Norm Smith. Now, walk us through, like, when that buzzer's gone and you've won the grand final, walk us through what was going through your head. Were you even thinking about Norm Smith, your performance on the field?
Yeah, he was already walking when they said, and the Norm Smith, he was on stage already.
No. No, it honestly wasn't something you really thought. Like, you don't play for those.
Yeah.
Like, you don't play to win the Larry Senstock medal or the Norm Smith. That's always nice and a bonus, and it's great to be able to do that because it means that you stood up in the biggest moment in your club's, history and had an influence. But yeah, I think like when you win a championship or win a grand final, it's hard to describe that first probably 30 seconds to a minute after.
It's a bit of a blank, isn't it? It's just everyone hugging each other, and it's just elation. I think from a personal point of view, everyone sets goals, and for a grand final and final series, my goal was always to play better than what I had in the regular series and elevate my game to the next level, which I always tried to do. And in some of those games, I was able to do it. We were doing it in front of 10 or 15,000 people. I don't know how you do it in front of 100 and whatever thousand. Plus, the build-up for you guys is a hell of a lot more than what we get. So you got the breakfast, parade, then you run out in front of 100,000 people. I'll hijack the interview here. And how do you block all of that out and produce your best on that day?
Well, I think it's one of those things that, as an athlete, though, you have this ability, and to block that out. So the only really time that I noticed the crowd at that point is at the start when we did our warm up, and we went out because our coach Malcolm Blythe, he said, when you go out there, just make sure you soak it up. Like, enjoy this moment, because there'll be a bit of fanfare that goes on, and then you got to go out and they do the national anthem and stuff. So don't switch on too early. Like, go out there and just relax. And so enjoy that little moment. There'll be a few roars, but then when after the national anthem, then that's the time to get it. So for that moment when we went out, and I just remember running out as that kid from Darwin, and then 99,000, whatever it is, 97, 99,000 people are there, and you run out, and I just remember thinking, there's more people in this stadium than where I come from, basically. It's what I thought. And that sort of went, and then I was like, no, that sort of feeling. But then when it came to the game, I can't remember the crowd. So as an athlete, I think when you're in those moments and when you're that focus is, you don't actually, like, that gets blocked out. You have this very narrow focus of what and all I'm worried about is my next contest. So what I'm going to do in that next contest, and zeroing in on that, and that crowd until the end of the game, when that siren goes, then it becomes a factor, and you're like, oh, wow.
And then so obviously that buzzer goes. Yeah, that first 30, 60 seconds is obviously a bit blank.
It's just euphoric. Like, it's like, it's so hard to describe. And Yeah, he's just, and then all the other emotions kick in. There's a bit of relief, like you've climbed the top of that mountain and all that hard work, and then a celebration with your teammates and everybody else. But for that first 30 seconds, it's pure elation, like Brett's saying. It's just like, it's hard.
We're up by 20 in ours, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because we could kind of
taste it before the buzzer went.
which is fun. You're not stressed right at the end. Like the last couple of minutes, you can kind of lap it up and enjoy it, and probably let the crowd in that little bit earlier and really soak it up. So for our first one, that was a plus.
And in basketball, you can see the clock, no worries every time. In football, can you see the clock like second
You just know that those little dudes, when they come out, like you can see it, like and you watch footy enough that you know that when the little redcoats or the security dudes come out, there's only about 3 or 4 minutes to go in the game. So that sort of time
that cues you to know.
Yeah.
Do the runners come out and tell you, you got a minute to go or a minute and a half?
But sometimes they don't get to everybody too, so it's hard. And in that, or when there's that many people screaming too, it's hard to get that message. But you sort of know that sort of, you know that there's time and that it's coming to an end. But yeah, I mean, it still doesn't get you ready for what's coming. Though.
Yeah, and then so from the moment that the buzzer goes, you know, and you know your emotions will start flooding, to the moment where you're actually collecting the medals, etc. It might be 20, 30 minutes between that and the presentation, for example.
Yeah.
Was there any point just before they announced you as the Norm Smith medalist where you kind of were like, maybe, you know, you sort of like had 30 minutes, you reflected on your game and you thought, maybe, or it was just zero?
Nah, well, there's a guy who works with the AFL, Patrick Keane. He came up and actually told me. I think I was hugging, I can't remember who it was Bill Sanders, or one of our, like our CEO, or it was one of those guys, and he actually come and grabbed me and said, "Oh, you've won the Norm Smith. We need you to come but I was just like, you're just sort of in that moment. And for me though, it was like, it's funny when you talk about it, is that, and not that it didn't. It wasn't something that I wasn't ready for though, because I'd won so many Norm Smith medals as a kid in my mum and dad's lounge room in their backyard. You know, I already won 1,000 of them.
Yeah,
playing
wow.
against my brother. And for me, it was coming from the territory. It wasn't something that was foreign, because there's 2 blokes that played in grand finals before me. One was named Maurice Rioli and one was Michael Long, and they're both Norm Smith medalists. So not that there was any pressure, but like it was always something that was achievable.
Yeah.
So it was like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Not that I went out and said, I'm going to win the Norm Smith medal, but it's always something that was in, I guess, a little thing in the back of your mind. You thought, you know, like as an athlete, it's like you want to be the best on the biggest day, on the biggest stage in your sport. And what's the best way to do that? It's to win the Norm Smith. It's to win the Larry Senstock. So, you know, and knowing that, said that you've been able to do that. I think playing your best football in the biggest games is the measure of an athlete. Like, and not to blow wind up, you know, my own backside, but but that's how you want to be remembered as a person.
Absolutely.
You know, in your sport, is that you wanted to be there, and you know, you want your team to be able to rely on you to do those things.
So that's 97. So that's your first. And then we go to 98. And both of you guys are champions, you know, in your own fields in 98. And For me, it was a very memorable year because, like we were talking before, it was a year where I came to Adelaide and, you know, all the celebrations were happening. And I think maybe the Thunderbirds, the women's netball team,
Thunderbirds and the Lightning, the women's basketball team and the netball.
And the netball.
So
We had all
SA
four.
in 98 got 4 championships across. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been done in any other state, but hence we coined ourselves Title Town for Adelaide in that year. And like we both vividly remember the parade that they held for all 4 teams, where we started off at the War Memorial and got driven around in cars down King William Street, and they had a big stage set up. And it was like the pageant. There was that many people there. And I remember they had the 4 captains, so myself, Mark Bickley, Rachel Spawn and Catherine Harvey-Williams all standing with our trophies up there, and I've got a photo at home of that with the sea of people, and it was amazing. Like they were all there for the Crows, but the rest of us loved it. It was great. So we did the same thing after our 2002 championship, and there was about 10 people that came out to watch. So that was the kind of where we're at, but we loved it.
Yeah, wow. And then, so I guess, walk us through one at a time, I guess, firstly with you, just the regular season, you know, how you started, how you felt towards it, where you finished at the end.
Yeah.
And then how the playoffs into the grand final sort of played out for you guys.
So our first championship, we finished second, I think, on the ladder. We had, because we missed the playoffs the year before in 97. Phil Smythe came in 98 and recruited in Dunhill, me and Kevin Brooks, and a fairly similar lineup to what we had in 97.
So they came in 98?
Beyond that, so they came in 98, yeah. Made a huge change to the lineup, and amazing players, obviously. So we finished second to that Magic team that were 24-2, and a lot of people are calling the best team of all time. And so that was, we played them in the grand final series, so it was, for us, it was home, away to win it. So it was going to be, we hadn't beaten them all year. We were 0-3 against them. And we ground out a win here by 8 or so points, which gave us a lot of belief that we could beat them. Went over there and everyone expected them to win the 2 games at home.
Yeah.
We rolled into our pre-game, so we went in and just did where we do layups and shooting the day of the game. So we just were very relaxed. We were virtually kicking the ball to each other, nice and chilled. We'd seen them just before us. They were doing pitter-patter drills and slides, and we'd say to each other, they're going to be done by the time we play them tonight. Like, they look knackered. Yeah. So we rolled up, and we just ran them off their feet, and we're up by 20 and held them to like 30% from the floor or whatever. So it's just one of those games where it clicked. Kevin Brooks was MVP of the grand final series, and yeah, it was all went to plan.
And then, so is that when the Magic had Robert Rose?
No. So
Robert Rose was earlier on in...
Yeah, Robert Rose was earlier. He then came, in the meantime, came and played for us. And then he'd gone up to Townsville after that. So
in 98, he wasn't playing for the Magic or the Sixers?
No, they had Clint someone as their import, but their Australian content was amazing. They had Sam McKinnon, Jason Smith, Brett Wheeler, Frank Drimmick, some unbelievable lineup of players. So it was a big win, and one that we hadn't won since '86. So it was 12 years in between.
So that was 98. That was the first year with me and Brooks.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, them coming into the team has had a pretty significant impact. Were you still captain?
Yeah, so I was captain. 97 was my first year as captain. So
yeah, okay.
Wasn't the best start. We missed the playoffs. And it was difficult because Mark Davis had been the captain, who's 6'6", big black American. Everyone listened to him. Whenever he spoke, I was 23 years old and been given that mantle. So with a lot of senior players around me, which helped because I didn't have to say too much. And then, 98, we won it. And so I was captain of that team, which was great.
And then, so that's 98 for the Sixers. And then same year, Crows are winning. And I think at this point, are the leagues like both simultaneously happening around the same time, or is it they are? Okay. So for yourself, same sort of question, like as far as the regular season go, how did that unfold? Where did you end up? And then how was the final experience for the Crows in 98? And bearing in mind that I imagine once you won one, you got the pressure of people maybe expecting you guys to win, you know, back to back, where I'm anticipating in your first one, and both of your first ones, you don't really have that, you know. So how did you find, you know, that and the season and the finals and all that in 98?
Yeah, our season was a little bit different. We were sort of up and down again, but come to the finals, we sort of snuck into the finals. I think we finished 5th. So I reckon we're the last team to probably win a GF from 5th. So different path where as we, in 97, we, I guess we had the comfort of playing a few games at home. So first 2 finals before travelling to the G, whereas 98, all our finals were away. First final, we got pumped by Melbourne. Over there at the G, I think they beat us by 8-10 goals. It was embarrassing. And so we came back, tail between our legs, with our season was done. And for some reason, at 5th, like in the top 5, there was this crazy like double chance that you could have, and all the results fell our way. So that all the teams from below us had lost.
Ah, yeah.
We're like the highest loser. we get a like a reprieve. Hey boys, we're back in the finals. So we go back in and had to travel, played in Sydney in the wet. We ended up winning that by a few goals, I think, and it was horrid conditions. And then and we were always comfortable playing against the Swans. We had a good record against them at the SCG. And then, you know, you wouldn't dream of it. We get to play the Western Bulldogs in another prelim at the G. I reckon they were a bit worried about us.
The rematch.
Yeah, and it turned out to be that way in the end as well. And, you know, we ended up, I guess, sweeping the floor with them. They wasn't as competitive as that 97, whether or not that few mental demons. But we played really good footy that day as a group. And yeah, again, we got the opportunity after winning that game to play the Kangas, who were probably the best team of that 90s. I think that, you know, like if you look back over that period, that would have been probably the best team in the comp. So we definitely weren't favourites. We weren't going in there as with the pressure on us. We were the underdogs.
Even though you had won the championship the year before.
Because we hadn't had that great a season, and they dominated the year. So they'd come off, I think they beat St Kilda, I think it was, to get into the grand final.
What were they up at halftime? They were up by a bit, weren't they?
Yeah, I think they would have been maybe 30-something points up. And
I remember I've heard the Ducks say he'd already chalked up the win and got the Norm Smith and was ready to go.
Yeah, Wayne Carey, his famous line is that he won us the game because of all the points that he kicked. But I always say that pressure builds diamonds, and he couldn't stand up to the pressure.
Would you say that in that time was Wayne Carey seen as...
He was the best player in the competition.
Like the Michael Jordan or the LeBron James of the league at that time?
Don't call him Michael Jordan, because we don't need to pander to his ego. No, but he was the best player in the competition. Yeah. And had been for a long time. You know, he was the pin-up boy. He was he's probably the best player I've ever seen play the game. And he, so to beat the best team, you got to beat the best player. And there's a famous song that gets around about Peter Caven kicked the Roo boy's ass, and I always bring it up every time I see him. It's good. It's just one of those things that for us, I think the satisfying thing about that game is that we won another flag, but to beat the best team in that era, you know, it shows the measure of your team.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a team of stars. They had a list of really good players, but we were just able to play good footy. You know, through that game we built it up, and it sort of unfolded a bit like the St Kilda game in the end. And you know, coming from behind and being able to win and put the heat on them.
Was that the game Ellen kicked 5 or 6?
That was the year before. He kicked 5. I think. Or, yeah, 3 of them he kicked from half back. But yeah, this game is a little bit different, but it still sort of unfolded the same ways. Sort of same plays happen. He pushed different people into the same position, like in through the midfield, and that Darren Jarman goes forward and kicks, you know, 4 or 5 goals.
A couple of crackers.
I was going to say some magical shit, as he used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just one, and then that was it. Like that was the, you know, again, we had this belief that we could beat anyone, even though we got our pants pulled down by Melbourne in that first final. We still had an inner belief that that no matter who we came up against, we could
Beat them on the day. And then the other thing that unfolded the same is you also won the Norm Smith in '98. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, there might have been 2 or 3 players, maybe more, a couple more that have won more or 2 Norm Smith medals. No one besides you has ever won them back to back. Is that correct?
Yep. No back-to-backs.
Wow. How does it feel to have that accolade under the belt?
Yeah, it's one of those things like you just, you know, as a footballer or as a sports person, you want to be at your best on the biggest stage, and you know, to do that twice shows that, I guess, that you've been able to stand that test and to be able to do that. So yeah, it's I don't know. It's for me. It was a dream to be able to do it, but playing premierships is the biggest thing for me. But to be able to have those Norm Smiths, I think it's just a little bit of that cherry on top of everything else.
The following year, '99, Crows didn't win the flag. Yeah, it was a pretty. What was the big change from?
We had a lot of stuff went on, injuries, bit of form. Our coach had gone through some personal stuff. His wife was very sick at the time as well, and so dealing with that. So there was a lot of different stresses that had come in, and blokes had missed a fair bit of footy. I think I missed a fair bit of footy that year as well through some knee troubles. So that sort of really hurts when you can't get that continuity of those guys going. And in the end, we struggled. We ended up finishing, I think it was 11th or 12th.
Yeah,
so outside the 8, and it was. And then we had a few older blokes that were coming towards the end as well. And this is one of those things. It would have been great to be able to. And then our coach finished, Malcolm Blight finished up at the end of that, towards the end of that season. Would have been great if we would have been able to keep him around a bit longer and to get through that period. But family comes first, and then it was a bit of a sad sort of end, and then we had to rebuild ourselves up as a club.
Well, the good news for South Australia in that year was that although the Crows didn't make the 8, the Sixers got their second title.
Yeah, we got our back-to-back. So we as a league changed from going head-to-head against the football. They thought it'd be a good idea to go summer.
Yeah.
So we nearly went back-to-back seasons. We had like a couple of months off and then went straight into the next season. It was a slightly shorter season and over summer this time. So it was a quick turnaround. We had good form still, and we finished on top of the table and ended up playing against another Brian Gorgon-led Melbourne team. They'd turned from the Magic into the Titans, and we played them in a best of three. This time it was away, home, home, and we won the first one away. So we kind of got a bit of ahead of ourselves, thinking we're coming home, we'll easily win this. And they were very well coached and very physical, and they just beat the absolute crap out of us in game two and won by 8 or 10, and we thought, oh, we're in trouble here. We've got to turn this thing back on, and luckily we was able to kind of grind out game three.
And then so that gives you, 2 in a row. Because you got a finals MVP, but it wasn't until a bit later, wasn't it?
So that was my first finals MVP.
That was 99, your first finals.
Yeah.
So okay.
It's pretty impressive for Phil Smythe to come in your first 2 years, you win championships. And we were very successful through that late 90s period and early 2000s with that kind of group that we had.
Because then you've won back-to-back 98, 99. Now, I think after the back-to-back with the Crows haven't won a flag since, but have made the 8 a fair few times and been in the running. Whereas in the Sixers, you got back-to-back 98, 99. Then did you get another ring in 02?
01, 02, yeah. So we only narrowly missed out on making it to the grand finals in those next couple of years after the back-to-backs. I think we got beaten on buzzer beaters, and it was really close losses. And then that 01, 02, we were expected to finish kind of middle of the road, 6th or 7th. We had an average team on paper, but a lot of really good role players. And we brought in Willie Farley. That was his first year in the league.
Ah, yeah.
So we met up with him over in China, played a series against the national team, which had Yao Ming, 7'6", and their national players, and we beat them, drew with them, and lost to them in a 3-game series. It was the first time they'd lost to a club team. So we had a really good feel. We started the year with just the 1 import, and but had a good group. We were doing pretty well. And then about halfway through the season, we brought in Matt Garrison as our second import.
Yeah, I remember.
And that really injected a lot of energy. And he was a really good link between our younger players and our older players. So we had a couple of teams we really struggled against, like the Melbourne Tigers and a couple other teams that we didn't match up well on, Perth that year. But the finals fell our way in the teams that we played against. And then we ended up playing against West Sydney in the grand final, and which was a team that we did match up well on. And we won the first game here, went over there, lost by 3 points in a game that we probably could have won, and then felt pretty confident coming back here for the last game, and just everything went right. We were up by 25 or something at half time.
Yeah, wow.
And I think we were 13 or 15 from the 3. Guys like Rupert Sapwell came on off the bench and had 18 at the half.
Off the bench?
Off the bench. And so it was one of those games where the role players really stepped up, and he was the X factor.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty much the rest of us did as expected,
Yep.
but he was in that game 3, that difference between the two. And yeah, so we ended up winning by close to 20.
And did you get a finals MVP?
And so that was my second Larry Senstock medal in that one.
Yeah, wow. And then those 3 titles in that bracket, me and Brooks played in all those 3.
No, so me and Brooks played in the 98, 99, and then we had Willie Farley and Matt Garrison as our imports for that.
Now, out of, from my memory, in regards to imports, probably me and Brooks, I remember when they came through and, obviously winning titles, that was like a big deal. I remember, dudes would see him out and stuff. And then...
How they hated going out.
Yeah. Well, they went out a couple of times.
Yeah, they were at the R&B clubs and that. And then you had Willie Farley, who was dope. And I remember that clearly as well because it was the year that the Sixers was sponsored by, I think, N1.
Yep.
and I really liked the jerseys and the warm-up tops. It was the 1 year that I went and bought all the Sixers merch.
Yeah, and everyone not equated him to, but likened him to Jordan. He played a very similar style, a little bit smaller, but he copied all of his moves.
Yeah.
Silky smooth, and fun to play with. He was exciting. He was great. Brought the crowd into the games. So.
And then the other import that I remember more recent is Jerome Randall.
Yep.
So for me, out of those four, they're just all amazing in their own right to watch as a spectator. But as someone who played with them, who was captain during some of the time that they were playing with you, how was it playing with those imports? Who was your favourite import to play with and why?
Jeez.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it?
You know, start an argument here.
I didn't play with Randall. I enjoyed watching him play.
That's right,
He's
yeah.
one of the players that, through that era, I would have paid to watch. It was exciting. Favourite one to play with would have been Darnell. He's not as offensively talented as the other ones, but he, as a whole game and entirety of a player, just was one of those guys that whatever you needed to win the game, he would do. So if you needed rebounds, he would have had 12 rebounds. If you needed blocks, he would have had 5 blocks. And that first championship where we won in Melbourne against the Magic, he had them second-guessing everything. He must have had 3 or 4 blocks early in the game and decisive blocks, like swatting it into the 10th row. And so virtually from then on, everyone was shooting, kind of looking for him.
Yeah.
And he just changed the whole game. And we went over after the 98 or 99 championship, we got invited to the World Club Championship, and we played against the best European club teams and NBA teams, and it was good to see him on that international stage just doing exactly the same thing. He was a remarkable player.
He was cooler than KB too. Yeah, better dress sense.
Bit more swagger. And then so that's, so you ended up with 3 championships.
Yep.
And 2 finals MVPs.
Yep. Just one more championship than Andrew.
You don't have to bring that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're comparing, just one more.
I'm summarising.
Sure, they were sort of giving them away back then, I think. Yeah.
And yourself, you got 2 and 2 as well. And then Brett, you've retired in 2009, and you have retired in the following year.
Yep.
2010. So, what I then want to ask you guys is, because I watched you guys compete a lot, and there were some players or clubs that I deem as either legendary players or legendary clubs that you guys would have played against, that I'd really be interested to know what you guys thought, of them as competitors, teammates, etc. I guess for football, being a West Coast Eagles fan, before 95, I remember dudes like Lewis, was it Peter Matera?
Peter Matera, yeah.
Because Phil came after.
Great player.
Yeah.
5-time All-Australian, Norm Smith medalist, premiership player.
Yeah, so you would have played against Phil, not Peter? Or
Both.
You played against both?
Yep.
Okay, so I guess starting there, how was your experience playing against both those guys? Because I remember them being crazy on the field.
Oh, yeah. Crazy fast, crazy skills. Peter Matera was one of my idols. So play against him, the Roo boy, man, it's unbelievable.
Did you play the same position?
He played more as a wingman, he's a genuine wingman, and that link. I just have these visions of him running down the wing and taking 4 or 5 bounces and kicking goals. He was an unbelievable player. Whereas Phil was a bit more close to home. He was that half forward pocket. Very dangerous. He probably was one of those guys that helped change the way that those small forwards played, with lots of pressure, tackling, and being able to keep that ball inside 50. So 2 very different type players, but yeah, they, that West Coast team through there. Chris Lewis, I love watching him play. My wife's an old West Coast fan, and she had all their posters up on her wall when she was young. So I remember all those. But Glenn Jakovich's.
That's right.
Your John Worsfold's, Guy McKenna's, Peter Sumich's,
McIntosh in the back.
Brett Hetty, McIntosh.
Yeah. It's an all-star cast, isn't it?
Dean Kemp. Like you just rattle these blokes off. They're all Hall of Fame. They're an incredible player. They had an incredible side back then when they came into the competition, and built on that, won a few flags. But yeah, like Peter Matera, he's probably in my. Well, we did a top 5. He was in my top 5 when we were talking about the best players or Indigenous players that I've ever seen play the game.
And then I guess so they were early to late 90s, I think. Peter Matera was that early.
Yeah.
And Phil was
a little bit later, yeah.
Bit later. So then, I guess the question to you, similar, in that 90s bracket, my favourite team was, the Magic, Southeast Melbourne Magic. And I remember, Robert Rose, Bruce Bolden, I guess Scott Ninnis, somewhere in there.
He's not that good.
Lucas, I think, was one.
Darren Lucas, Dean Utoff, John Dodge.
Andrew
Parkinson.
Parkinson, he used to pop the 3.
A little microwave. And they were the measuring stick at that time. The Brian Gorgon teams out of Melbourne, they were all defensively orientated, probably except some of those teams where you had Scott Ninnis and Darren Lucas running the wing, and Darren Utoff throwing it full court, and just hitting them on dimes, laying it up. They created so much pressure, and then just ran off of that, and no wonder they dominated.
And then if you look at, going back to the Crows and AFL, if you look at then playing against the latter West Coast teams where you had Judd, Cousins and Kerr,
Embley.
And I think that was like 05-ish, and then for a few years. How did you find competing against the Eagles of that era, and would you say that that's debatably, the best midfield in AFL history? Yeah,
they'd go down as one of the best in AFL in that era, definitely. It's hard to compare when you got so many good midfield groups that have come through. Brisbane Lions, Geelong team. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to see where they sit, but they definitely were. Even that Sydney team that they played those epic finals and games against over that time too. It would have been they were great. We could never get past them.
I remember seeing some epic battles.
Yeah, we had some great games. It was the 3 of us. It was us, and there's always these battles talked about between West Coast and Sydney, but we were all in that same. The 3 of us, I think, at that time, top 3 teams in the competition for probably 5 or 6 years, and it was always one of those things that we always seemed to have Sydney's measure. Sydney for a period of time had West Coast measure, and then West Coast had our. It was like how we all matched up on each other. It was very. There were some great battles, and it would have been nice to get that opportunity to play against one of them in the big dance, but just couldn't get through because they were just some of those they just played awesome footy at the right time, and we thought we had them here once, World Cup. Once in, might have been 05.
I reckon that's the game where I remember, man.
Yeah, we were up and then they just came out after half time and just destroyed us. So, jeez, what happened there? But we needed to be buffed. We needed a timeout. Yeah. It's timeout. But yeah.
And then I guess in that era, when we go back to NBL, the Magic had then turned into the Titans by that period. And I mean, who were the star players that you recall from the Titans?
I think as we kind of moved into the turn of the century and kind of 2005 onwards, the Wildcats were probably the the team and the measuring stick.
Yeah.
And WA, they do sports so well over there with West Coast and Freo, and then the Wildcats. Like they're the only team I think that's made finals for 33 years plus or whatever, which is so impressive how that organisation is run and the teams they've put together, and that kind of era where they had Ricky Grace and James Crawford, Vlahoff, Fisher, Pinder, amazing teams where they've just been able to keep revolving great players through the door to today, where they've got best player I've seen nearly ever play in the league in Bryce Cotton. So it's just exciting players they're able to get there.
You actually got to play not one, not two, but three Olympic, on three different Olympic Australian teams. And therefore that means that you may not have played the original dream team, but you got to play your LeBrons, your Iversons, Kobe.
Kobe didn't play, no. We had, on that first team we played against, had Barkley, Tim Duncan, Scottie Pippen, who else? Shaq, Gary Payton, John Stockton, unbelievable list. And I remember going into that game, because these are all guys I'd grown up watching, and on telly, they're all worth 20, 30 mil a year. Our piddly little sum that we were worth. And it was the only game I've ever gone into where I've gone, I just want to get the ball over half court. I just don't want to lose the ball. That was the kind of mindset I had. So that was the advantage that they had over everyone, is that they'd already beaten us before we'd hopped on the court.
Psychologically.
That's what you say when you play against me, don't you?
So in one-on-one.
I just want to get the ball over half court. Here comes Andrew Payton.
But when we played them kind of each Olympic year, and 2004 we played them again, and they had LeBron, Duncan, Iverson, Carmelo Anthony. They had another list of amazing players, but our confidence had grown. A couple of European teams had knocked them off. So we thought we were a chance, and we led it for 3.5 quarters. They only overran us in like the last 5 minutes.
Wow.
So we only just missed out on beating them, and I actually, in that Olympics, got to play a lot more than I did the first two, and so I played a fair bit against them and scored, and it was a huge thrill.
So who were you matched up against in those games? Because you were playing point, weren't you?
Yeah, so in that first one, I didn't play much, but against Payton and Stockton. And then...
Payton, that would have been a nightmare.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember dribbling and he's right in front of me. I turned, he's right in front of me.
Yeah,
No, they didn't call him the glove for nothing. He was ridiculous. And Stockton was the same. He was so talented. And then in the next one, they had Iverson and they had, can't remember who the other guards were. They're impressive, whoever they were.
Funny how you remember Iverson, though.
Yeah, I remember him just a couple of moves. And
Did he get
because
you?
they didn't have many, he didn't, but they didn't have many outside shooters. So it was only really him and Stephen Marbury, I think, was there, and Carmelo Anthony. They were the only three we identified as being really good outside shooters. The rest were slashers. So it was one of the few games in international competition where our team was told, we're going to play a zone against them and we're going to pack it in and just dare them to shoot
Force them to shoot.
And if they hit, they hit.
They miss.
If they miss, and they were missing, and right through that Olympics, they shot the ball terribly. So that kind of helped us. The only reason they overpowered us in the last quarter is they got into the open court, and those guys in the open court are unstoppable. They're fun to watch. You nearly turn it over just to watch them.
I was supposed to be chasing that dude.
Yeah. But yeah, it was good fun.
And do you have like a memorable moment, like on the court, whether it was you got someone or someone got you?
Well, I remember I hit 3 threes in the last game against them, so I remember those. But I remember on the other flip side of that, in my first time I played them, I went for a 3-point shot, and Scottie Pippen just tapped my elbow as I shot it, and the ball went 100 miles an hour straight at the back. It landed about the 3-point line. It was way off. And then I got one more try to score in that game. I got a steal, no one in front of me, and I was screaming down the court. I look over my shoulder, and there was Scottie Pippen again, like 3 feet behind me. And so I jumped, threw it up, clanged it off the backboard again. So I thought he's going to block this into the 5th row.
Yeah.
So that was my only time. So, yeah, it was good.
Years ago, NBL players, Australians making it to the NBA was quite rare. It happened, I remember, when Andrew Gaze. But Shane
Andrew Gaze
Hill,
made it with San Antonio.
Yeah. Shane Hill had a
Luke
run.
Longley, obviously, with the Bulls. But the pathway was more you have to go to college and get drafted and get in there. Whereas Andrew Gaze went through Seton Hall, but obviously through his international play got picked. And then Shane Hill got his go with the Timberwolves. And a lot of that was to do with playing against the Dream Team.
Yeah, wow.
He had 32 or 34 points when we played him. And he had that clash with Charles Barkley.
That was classic.
Where Barkley took his legs out, he stood up, they went face to face, and I was cheering for Barkley to smash him. He didn't. He tried, because that was in the game in Salt Lake City prior to the Olympics. Then we played him at the Olympics in the crossover to get to the gold medal game. And I remember Barkley and Peyton was on Shane, and Barkley came up to set a screen, tried to knock him out, missed him, but it caused a switch. So Shane was guarding Barkley down in the block, and Barkley got the ball and swung around with an elbow that would have killed him. But Shane had seen what was happening and just stepped right back, and he just gave him a layup pretty much. But
so was it on the after that play on the way back down the court that shit was being? Is that when that?
Oh, it was pretty much the whole time.
Game,
After he took his legs out, they went face to face and created this big scene. And because he had 34, and they're like this little Aussie stood up to Charles Barkley, it got him all this media as well. And obviously he was a good player, and I think that helped him though get through.
And then, so if he was on your team, why did you still want Barkley to knock him?
I wanted to get on the court. I wanted to play. I was sitting on the bench.
Smash him.
He gets knocked out. I'm going to play 20 minutes here.
That's gold.
But yeah, unfortunately, didn't.
So you had those sorts, you had some players back then. Now it seems like there's a bit more of an avenue. You got your Mitch Creeks and a bunch of other names that I can't remember right now. The one that really stands out, partly because, well, A, he's great. B, I'm pretty sure he's got a ring with the Spurs, maybe a couple. He was at Colonnades like last year, is Paddy Mills. And he has had a real good run in the NBA. I guess the question to both of you is, what impact do you think Paddy Mills has had on Australian basketball? And then what impact, furthermore, do you think that he's had on, I guess, Aboriginal people in sports and Indigenous culture?
Well, yeah, I had an amazing career. And one of my highlights off the court was I got to present him with his first Olympic singlet, because he took over the number 5 singlet and obviously did a bit better with it than I did.
He's using your spirit in the jumper.
Exactly, yeah. I gave him everything I had. But yeah, he's won several championships with San Antonio, been one of their core players, and has done amazing stuff. But what he's been doing off the court, especially recently, supporting a lot of different charities here, is amazing. The amount of money he's giving back and giving back to young Aboriginal Indigenous kids is spectacular. And yeah, he's really, from America, trying to connect as much as he can and help out in as many ways as he can. And I know quite a few people that run some of those charities, and he's doing a great job with them.
Yeah, I think the fact that his connection, he's got a great platform to be able to use to make change. Yeah. But then what he's doing with that, and I think the one thing that I love to see, it's kudos to San Antonio too, because they tend to support a lot of the stuff that he does. But like, he's a Torres Strait Aboriginal man that's been able to impart a lot of his culture on that platform. So, and a lot of the stuff that he gets involved in the San Antonio community as well, where and you see Coach Pop is always talking about his connection and his ability to be that almost that cultural leader of the Spurs, is all the stuff that he's grown up with here, with his family, and that tie and learning about himself and learning about his people, that he's been able to impart a lot of that and use that platform back from the States to be able to make that change and support those charities like Brett's saying. So, it's great that he has the ability to do that, you just see the flow-on effect that has on people, and it's great to be able to walk around and see, when I go into communities and that, because basketball, I guess, hasn't had like a massive, obviously your Jordans and whatnot, they've had impacts in there. You see but now you go into a lot of these places and you see a Paddy Mills singlet run around.
Yeah.
That's like awesome to see.
It's pretty good. He's very giving of his time. I run a business that sends basketball teams to America and they play games, but they go to NBA games, and every time we ask him to come out and say hello to the group, without fail, he's giving of his time. He'll come out and give back, which is pretty impressive. And from a playing perspective, he's not only shown at NBA, which is the best league in the world, but it's a different game playing in Olympics. It's a different style, and he's been able to dominate in both styles. He led the Olympics in scoring, and which is pretty impressive for someone that's 6'1".
In 2011, you got invited by the UN to do a speech on racism in sports. Now, one thing I've always wondered is, you look at AFL, and you have a number of Aboriginal, Indigenous players. When you look at basketball, NBL or NBA, you don't really have that. You've got Paddy Mills, and maybe there are some others that I'm forgetting about. Maybe there's
Nathan Jawai is another one that's done very well.
Okay, so, but you can sort of see how the avenue for AFL is maybe more prominent than it is for, say, NBL. Obviously, NBA is overseas, so we won't really look at that. But do you think that the reason behind that is because of racism in sport, or is it because of lack of exposure of that sport in Indigenous communities, or am I way off here?
No, I think you're sort of around the mark. I think a lot of it comes down to exposure. So having people like Paddy, great role models to be able to do that. And he's led a team. They've got the Indigenous Basketball Foundation that they've set up as well, that they're going in and impacting. They're building courts and utilising a lot of that to be able to go and to do that into some of the communities. Have that presence that probably never had that opportunity in the past. Football has always had that. Being, I guess, our country's Indigenous game is that it has an opportunity to be able to do that. We've had a lot of great players that we can leverage from to be able to go and to promote and get out there. I still don't think that the AFL do it as best as they could. They can still get out there and do a lot more and invest more time. But yeah, I think there is that opportunity now that basketball can certainly make and utilising people like Paddy to actually have a massive impact and create some of those pathways. Because no doubt that people, every time I go into communities and with the programs that I've run, is that a lot of kids, they don't want to kick the footy, they want to play soccer or play basketball. So I find myself doing that a lot. That's where I get my great handles from.
Oh, wow. And then so, in relation to the speech that you gave, to the UN, that's a pretty, I don't know too much about politics and all that, but to my understanding, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
How did it feel to be asked to do that, and then how did it feel to actually execute the speech?
No, it was a great honour to be able to be asked to go to Geneva and.
Who wrote your speech?
Was it you?
No.
Nah. It was great. It was be able to talk about the positive impact that sport can have, to combat racism and utilise, have that, I guess that footprint that we have to be able to address a lot of these issues. It's obviously something that's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
But it's, I think the AFL have done a great job in leading the way in terms of the way that they by coming up with the racial vilification policy and procedures that actually deals with it, and so it's not something that's swept under the carpet. And it was about talking to the UN about some of those mechanisms that been able to utilise to be able to be, I guess, world leaders in that space. And yeah, it was. It was a bit of a whirlwind trip for me to get over there, and I think it was like minus bloody 20 degrees or something. And the only time I was sweating and feeling warm was sitting in there delivering that speech. I'd peel off all my jumpers and sitting there sweating. But no, it was great to be able. We had a positive impact. We got to spend some time with the at the IOC and talk to the Olympic guys about some of the stuff that they're doing, and also at FIFA. So I spent some time at FIFA and talking to those guys, and they've obviously, soccer has been a really troubled sport when it comes to racism for a long period of time. So they were looking at some of the stuff that the AFL was doing. So they would have some really good conversations about some of those policies that were happening here, and they were looking at some of the stuff that they could implement. So it was really good. I enjoyed it to be able to go over there, and probably the best thing for me going into the Olympic museum and having a look, and then
Did you see me in there?
Can't remember.
Maybe in the background.
You're getting dunked on? No. But the best thing that I saw was I walked into the Olympic Museum, and being a proud Australian and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander man too, was that they had Jesse Owens' spikes sitting there.
Oh, wow.
And right next to Jesse Owens' spikes was Kathy Freeman's spikes. And it was just like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. You're in a million miles from home, and you see like this, and it was it was really surreal to see that, and obviously, with what Kathy's done and how much of an inspiration she is, and she's, her spikes are sitting next to Jesse Owens. You're like, wow, how cool is that?
In your career, NBL, top 5. Let's go top 5 imports. Off the top of the head, though, not in order. This is just the top 5 that come to your head. We all went miss 1 or 2. Yep. But top 5 imports, then top 5 locals, all time.
Jeepers.
We could be here forever.
Yeah, it's hard.
Off the top, though, that's what I mean.
We do lists from time to time.
And Andrew, you're going to cop a very similar question. So
I'd go Mark Davis.
Yep.
I'd go Robert Rose.
Yep.
I'd go Darnell Mee.
Yep.
I'd go Ricky Grace. And I would go Bryce Cotton.
Now, that last name is a name that I'm not familiar with.
So he's the import for the Wildcats. Won a couple of titles and MVPs in the grand finals.
In what years?
He's spectacular.
Current.
Just current.
Current.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's one of the few I'd put in from current day. Amazing. And those other 4, I think, longevity and obviously all Hall of Famers. Great players. As far as local players, I would go Andrew Gaze.
Can't put yourself in, can you?
Yeah. I'm expecting both of you to do it.
Well, Andrew Gaze, Phil Smythe, would go Paddy Mills. Are we able to go with?
Yeah.
NBA guys like that are Australian?
Let's go with that now because we've put Paddy Mills in there.
Well, he did come back and play for the Tigers for a year.
Did he?
Joe Ingles played for the Dragons, and I think probably Andrew Bogut.
No Longley?
Well, yeah, I'm missing out on
Give me five.
Bradkey, Longley.
So honourable mentions, Bradkey, Longley.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Shane Heal would be in there.
Anstey.
Sam McKinnon, Chris Anstey.
5. Come on, man.
Yeah, I mean,
Brett Maher.
they should be in there.
Yeah. And then I guess for yourself, top. So, I mean, everyone in AFL, I guess, is local. But I want to split it to top 5 Aboriginal players and top 5 non-Aboriginal players. In your opinion.
Gosh.
And you can.
You should listen. You listen to our podcast. You can get Bunji and
put
Brettster.
yourself in there.
Buzzsprout. Oh well, in no sort of order.
Yeah, top of the head.
Oh, top 5. So if I did top 5 Indigenous players, yeah. Well, for me, jeepers, because I'm going to change it now because we discussed this the other week.
And we'll have honourable mentions at the end.
Yeah, there's lots of honourable mentions. Oh, look. My 5 favourites were around that sort of mark. My favourite player of all time was Michael McLeod, so people wouldn't even know him, but I just loved him as a player. Played for the Bulldogs and for Brisbane. Michael Long, Peter Matera is in there. I'll have to chuck in a couple of younger blokes as well. Adam Goods for me, to win 2 Brownlows in 2 different positions is unbelievable. And who can I put in as 5? Oh gosh, someone I love to watch. I'll say someone.
I like watching with like Silky and Rioli.
I'd say. Dave Wirrapunda's.
He was one of my favourites all the time.
Yeah, he'd probably ring me up if I didn't say his name. But this is like Cyril. I love watching Cyril play. Rioli as well. So many good players. Sean Burgoyne's about to sign. He's going to play for 20 years. Incredible. But yeah, top 5. If I was thinking top 5 players, Wayne Carey I mentioned previously. Nathan Buckley, Michael Voss, James Hird, and I'll throw in, there's so many.
There's a lot.
Gary Ablett, Tony Long. We're going to start Gary Ablett Jr., Gary Ablett Sr., Chris Judds.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I'd hate to do.
Yeah.
Is those
because your answer will change almost every time you get asked.
It does, yeah.
Because
And I mean,
And you're always omitting a few people that should
right.
be in there.
you'll forget someone.
Oh, well, they miss out, don't they?
Yeah,
But
bad luck.
that's why it's
And you-
off the top of the head, no particular order. It's just the 5 that spring to you in the moment.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about, where you hold those players.
Oh yeah, and for me, a lot of those guys, like I get to play against them, play on them, and just marvel. A bit like Brett's saying about watching guys run down the court and jam. I'm playing on these guys and got some great lessons by doing it. Getting towed up by Nathan Buckley and James Hird is like some of my favourite memories.
Yeah.
They kicked my ass, but it was so good.
Top 5 hip-hop R&B artists that you like.
Top 5.
Off the top of the head.
Hip hop. Oh,
Boys to Men.
well,
One of your favourite.
Boys to Men, yes.
Boys to Men are good.
I love Boys to Men.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I went
Good-
and watched
good
Boys to Men
remixes,
at
man.
Thebby Theatre. Ice Cube for me. Like Lethal Injection, probably one of my favourite albums
Yeah,
of all
that's
time.
dope. I opened for Ice Cube at HQ in Theberton
Yeah,
Theatre.
like he just for me, I'm just a massive Ice Cube fan. Like old school. I was an Easy fan, so
Eazy-E?
Eazy-E,
Yep.
yeah.
Dr. Dre.
Even more so than probably NWA.
Yep.
Dre, Dr. Dre. Some for me, a lot of that old school. I was even like some of the hard stuff like Ice-T. I you know,
Yeah,
like
the
his
old
OG gangster, like
Yeah, I
that
remember
OG
that album. I had
is
that.
probably one of my favourite.
My
You know,
mum confiscated.
a lot of relatable tunes in that
Any
in
Snoop
that
in there?
album. Early Snoop Dogg, and then, you know, like I don't know, like
Eminem? Do you like Eminem?
oh, Eminem, but some of the like Soul for Real, Soul to Soul,
Yeah,
Digital
Candy Rain
Underground,
shit.
you know, like all these old,
90s R&B.
yeah, like
Yeah.
real early, like late 80s, early 90s, you know, growing up, you know, like your Guys and
Yep.
Johnny Gills. And
That's that New Jack Swing
New Jack
era.
Swing, all back through that era is a big one for me.
Yeah, wow.
That I love. Bobby Brown, when Bobby Brown was good.
Yeah.
Like
Before he fell off.
more so New Edition, that sort of
That
back in the
era.
New Edition days, like when they were young. So
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff for me.
The lesson. 7. Oh, yeah.